It's great to be here today. As a little bit of background on myself, I've been in the lobbying world, advocacy world, since about the last century. Worked for as many organizations and issues, community bankers, chiropractors, Red Cross, Boys and Girls Clubs. And now I find myself being able to put all of those years of experience to work for, well, you and my parents. I am the son of a high school English teacher. My mother's 85. She's been retired now. She was bragging the other day longer than she worked, so there's the dream. My father passed away many years ago, but he was a community college history professor. I attended community college, the same community college, and graduated from there before I went on to Bradley and then George Washington to get some political stuff. Politics is not really what drives me, but you know how it is when you have a kid young, you take the job you can find, and here we are. So it's really nice to be able to put those years of experience to work for these issues that are so important to you and to my own family. The other thing I'm able to kind of look through the lens here a little bit is putting myself in the shoes of, say, a 25, 27-year-old at a new job, and I can tell you I was not thinking about retirement. But when you work in an environment like this where you hear things like Tier 1 and Tier 2, you very quickly figure out which side of the fence you're on and how you're impacted by that. You know, they always say that you want to get to know who you're talking to. So, I mean, how many retirees do we have in the room today? And how many employees? And of those, Tier 1 or Tier 2? Any of you Tier 2? Okay, well, I'm talking to you all day, the rest of the day. No. You know, we have some regional calls every quarter, and one of the most recent ones, there was a gentleman from University of Illinois Urbana, one of our founding chapters, as you may know, who really compared it to that of like World War I and World War II. That Tier 1 is a battle that in many ways you've already fought and won. You've left the playbook there for others to pick up. If you're Tier 1, many actuarials will say you're good. You've crossed the Rubicon. You're good on the other side. Now, Tier 2 is a whole other conversation, as we know. And they're playing that game in the Capitol right now that they like to play, which is, you know, the kick the can game, the move the shell game. If you've noticed, although there have been hearings and discussions and proposals about Tier 2 reform, nothing has actually moved. So what you want to do is you want to put this in its proper context. Now, as a history major son, I can't help but put it in that historical context. Right now, the narrative says that you guys are taking money from the state, pension sweeteners and all the rest of it, right? That narrative has to be flipped on its head, and the only way we can do that is with you, your voice, Tier 2 people coming up, stepping up, and fighting the same fight that Tier 1 has fought before you. It's not going to change because they should do it, or because it's the right thing to do. In fact, it's my assertion, and I'm trying to research and validate it, but I think the whole reason we have a diminishment clause in the state constitution is because there's likely instances you can point to in post-World War II era where the can got kicked, the pensions didn't get paid, the priorities of the day took over the commitments to the future. Now, we've got to change that mindset in people's minds. Most recently, there were 5 different precincts in the area here. 3 were in Cook County, 1 was in Will, and 1 was in DuPage. And even the way the question was phrased is nefarious. But all 5 had the exact same phrasing. It was basically, should we do pension reform to take care of current retirees so that we can get property tax reform? Now, you guys all know how confusing that is. That doesn't make sense, but everybody voted for it. It was a 75 to 25. So you got to start asking yourself, what's the motivation there? And how do you connect something with state government covering pension reform with local government, property tax, et cetera? Honestly, politicians don't care. They're going to use the confusion to their advantage as much as they can. And that's why Tier 2 folks need to start speaking with a louder voice. And SUA is the vehicle by which you can do that. No, I am not the State University Retirement System. I do not represent them. I do not work for them. We are the State University's Annuitants Association, and unfortunately my peanut gallery left because I was going to ask them to raise their hand if they knew what the word annuitant meant. This is another barrier we have, and in fact it was the executive director of the State University's retirement system who told me this in one of my early meetings. She said the word annuitant is a barrier to membership. And it was as if she had been reading my recent membership reports. So I want to commend you and Kathy and everybody for all the hard work that you're doing here. But don't beat yourself up if the traditional approaches to membership are not yielding the traditional results. That's why SUA is trying to work on even some rebranding, certainly some digital marketing that will help us grab members where they live. If I ask some of you guys who are not members how much it costs for an annual membership, anybody? It's less than $1 a week. Our highest chapter dues is $51 a year, all right? And we're getting ready to embark on some very exciting things that we've already made our money back. We had an employee, a coworker, Thomas, who went to Chicago last week. We've got a new partnership with some EBG, it's called Member Deals, and he already made saved $110 with one hotel visit. So that already paid for your dues twice. But, you know, obviously those are for the folks who are counting the pennies. If you're really counting the pennies, you need to look towards the future and what we can do today to make sure that you get what you've earned and what you deserve tomorrow. There is no question that Tier 2 is a diminishment. You'll see it in your documents there. And no, Brian did not author those documents. That's a function of your SUAA legislative committee that is continuing to grow and evolve, and we certainly want representation from all of our regions in that group. But what you'll see there at the top, the first page, is something that I think will impact this audience very particularly, and it's something that maybe those of you who are on the cusp of retirement haven't thought about, and those are your health care benefits. When you retire, the state says, here you go, here's your health care benefits. They're not worried about whether or not you live in Champaign or Portugal, Peoria, or the Philippines. Many people who retire want to move on and go to other places, and sometimes the one-size-fits-all plan does not work where you live. We're trying to call it access to choice. I can save you from reading that document in one word. What we're looking for is choice. There is no reasonable person in the world today who can say that a one single health plan is going to serve everybody in the state, let alone outside the state, let alone your circumstances, your needs, your doctor, your provider. And what you're finding out is that you go thinking you have insurance and then you produce it and the provider doesn't take it. Just as you'll read about 12/31/24, there was about 7 to 10 hospitals in the state of Illinois that were down to the wire with CVS Aetna on their negotiations and on whether or not they were going to accept their benefits. Now, de facto, what that means is the state has not provided you the benefits that they're supposed to provide you. If you walk in and produce for medical care and the benefits don't cover you, it would be my assertion you weren't covered. And we need to continue to work together on those issues as well. So SUA is a one-stop shop, if you will. For if you're a Tier 1 employee, we're going to help you build that bridge. We're going to help you get to the CSRS folks that need to answer your questions. If you're a Tier 1 retiree, we're helping to work on those health care benefits, your access to choice, where you are, and when you need it. If you're a Tier 2 employee, there are Tier 2 retirees, and this is a good segue into what was known as safe harbor. Anybody ever heard of that one? How about a big old congratulations to the SUAA chapters for the passage of the Social Security Fairness Act. Does that ring a bell? Yes. All right. So as a part of the Social Security mix between the public pension systems and the Social Security, you go back in your Wayback Machine when Illinois said, no thank you, and they created this public pension system, which is another big disconnect with the public. They think you got something they didn't, when in actuality, you were told you don't get what everyone else gets, right? Social Security. So the law at the time said, the Fed said, if you're going to do your own system, it has to at least be as good as Social Security, right? What we're seeing now after 10 years and inflation and everything else that's happening is that that is not as good as Social Security, and it is likely to fail what's called the safe harbor provision. Safe harbor being that there was a basement or a de minimis for people who retired to have at least that level of benefits. Now the state of Illinois is in trouble because if they are failing the safe harbor test, there will be millions and millions of legal fights and battles and everything else that they will have to do. So finally there is an incentive for the policymakers of this state to do something. Now, do you think they're going to allocate enough money to take care of this problem for the next 5, 10, 50 years? Or will they just give enough money to take care of it for the next year? Consider this, when you're in Social Security, 6.2% of your check goes towards it. When you're a CSRS participant, it's 8%, 9%, even as much as 11%. So are we going to let the state of Illinois pass with a C? Are we going to let them pass safe harbor by meeting what is obviously less than what you're already contributing to your own CSRS participation? Because that honestly is up to you. So one of the things we like to say when people say, what's going to happen to Tier 2? It's going to depend on what Tier 2 people do about it. Our door's wide open. We're inviting, we're welcoming you to the party. We've got the playbook, we've got the history, we've got the experience and the mentors, but we need you, Tier 2 folks, to join us and to be a part of it too. So I hope I've answered a little bit about where we're going. SUA internally, we've been working on some budget relieving, some revenue generating. One of the big questions I got when I started about 15 months in now, are we going to raise dues? That has not been our goal. The reason for that is because when you do the association organizational 101 stuff, one of the first things you look at is how much of your budget is made up from membership dues. Excuse me. This organization has for far too long relied too much on membership dues. It was around 90 to 95% of our budget. So we've immediately began to implement what we would call non-dues revenue plans, like that, the member deals is an example of that, so that we don't have to put the stress and the pressure on the members themselves. We're also exploring how we can be of benefit to you in the space of higher education funding and how we can be of benefit to your institution. We think a 2% increase is an oxymoron. That does not match inflation. It is clearly undermining the ability to recruit and retain students, and Tier 2 itself is clearly undermining the ability to recruit and retain staff. Another thing SUA pioneered this year, it's not in these documents because we weren't able to get it moving this year, but it's something called a deferred retirement option. What we're seeing is folks who retire and then turn around in their college can't replace, didn't replace, needs their help, needs them back, directly as a result of recruitment and retention issues from Tier 2. So what we're trying to do is to help both the school and the retirees find a way to do that where nobody's hurt or harmed or limited. So we're continuing to explore that. Right now, the general consensus is that the police and fire, they're going to try and explore that first and see how a drop plan works with that. But again, it's another example of a lot of smoke and no fire. They passed the House with it. It did not pass the Senate. It's not law at this time. But that is where the latest conversations are. And in fact, police and fire positions, which for us means campus security, is probably the one foot in the door for this conversation, because generally people accept and understand that a 67-year-old employee should not be carrying people out of a fiery building or otherwise. That to suggest that someone continues to hold those positions until they're 60, 67 years old is not realistic. And so there, but the grace of God, go the rest of the Tier 2 employees and retirees. So we're in this fight. We're not alone. We're partnered with the unions as much as we can be. But there will be times where people like us will have to say, it's not okay to take a pension holiday this year. It's not okay to put the needs of the employees today at the expense of what they've earned tomorrow. It's no question that there's a bit of a Chinese puzzle here. What we suggest to help the membership might hurt the fund, but we've got to be at the table or else we're on the menu. Any questions for me? Did I answer the questions I was ordered to, Kathy?
Yes, sir.
All right. We'll make sure we get that. All right, this is a quiet group.
We do have a couple more. The two that I'm skipping were what is the status of Tier 2 and the progress of Tier 2. I think you've covered that.
Okay.
Okay. The next one is, are there any current bills in the House or Senate to help with Tier 1?
Well, when you say help with Tier 1, I think the healthcare issues are something. Now, there's not a piece of legislation on that right now. What we're trying to do is to create a coalition. This time last year, we were pointing the finger at CVS Aetna and saying, you did it, you did it, you did it. And CVS is going, the provider, we're negotiating, we're contracting. The way this works is Central Management Services, the state of Illinois agency, chooses this plan. They chose CVS Aetna. And we're stuck. Even if we don't like CVS Aetna, even if it's bad, we're in year 3 of a 5-year contract, and they have the ability that we understand right now to renew for another 5. So to yell and scream isn't going to get us where we're going to go. We're hoping to build a coalition of folks. We already have reached out to the Illinois Hospital Association, of course the retired teachers who are experiencing similar issues. And so we're trying to build a coalition to address that issue because we know it's not going to be fixed in a single bill in a single year. Other Tier 1 issues, I mentioned the drop, I mentioned the deferred retirement option, things like that. What we envision, though, is a two-way street, is that if the chapters have a good idea, if you have a good idea, in fact, maybe you missed it, but we sent it out last fall, hey, if you've got a good legislative proposal or an idea, we're always looking for good ideas that can have an impact. For example, we introduced the drop, deferred retirement option. We realized that we weren't alone, that others are talking about it in a more global way. But you guys are limited to, I think, 60% if you go back and you do a little bit of work. Maybe there's a way to tweak 60% to 65. What you've got is somebody who's at the table who's constantly trying to push on your behalf where we can, when we can. So I think, yes, we're constantly working with and for Tier 1 retiree issues.
Another question is there any information on how CSRS is handling investments so that they keep doing well?
CSRS does a lot of information. In fact, their spring, I think they call it spring report, something like that, just came out. They do an annual report that gives you guidance on that. Now, for me, the experience I've had is sometimes we've had some members try to tell us to tell CSRS what they should and should not invest in. And SUA has been very clear about that. That's not our job. We are not investment professionals. We don't have that expertise. That is for CSRS to figure out. So yeah, I think CSRS is very transparent in telling you what they do and don't invest on, but we don't really take a role in that.
And another question, maybe you covered this while I was writing. It says, can you please give us information on, it says SSA with the Repeal Act.
Social Security Fairness Act. So I'll use my own parents because it's the best way to understand it for me. You guys in the summer, sometimes you have other jobs, or even before you started as in your college job, higher ed, whether it's groundskeeper, faculty, doesn't matter. You've had other jobs. And let's be honest, this is becoming more prevalent in today's world. It's very common for somebody to have worked in the workplace 30 years and have 7 jobs. One job 30 years is much less common. So what we're seeing is a combination and a hybrid of these two paths to pensions. However, folks that were in Tier 1, and for example, my mom, when she retired, was told that it's a windfall elimination provision, that you can't have both, it's double dipping. You earned X with your public pension, so it doesn't matter that you earned Y with your Social Security. Now the obvious, I think, human reaction to that is, it's mine, I earned it, right? Well, now the Social Security Fairness Act put that back in line and said, yeah, you earned it, here it is. There have been folks who, anybody in this audience received a payment already? That's what we're talking about. And that is perhaps the best lesson that you can give to Tier 2 folks, is that it's not one bill, 1 year, one time. It's perseverance over time. Because I think if you'd asked 10 years, 5 years ago, 20 years ago that was going to change, you probably rolled your eyes, right? In fact, a month to 6 weeks before that passed in Congress, the legislative stakeholder relations person from CSRS was at a chapter event like this and was quoted as saying, we don't think that's going to pass this year. So you just don't know. But politics can drive that train, clearly. For Illinois, just so you know, Social Security Fairness Act was co-sponsored by every member of the Illinois delegation except for Darren LaHood and Mary Miller. Except for Darren LaHood and Mary Miller. It's easier to remember that way, right? Instead of list all the ones who did. So we are, with the passage of that, I think in the lane of where's SUA going, first of all, we're going wherever the members drive us. I'm the taxi driver. You guys are telling us where to go. Okay? I might tell you how to cut through traffic or how to shorten the route, but you guys are driving this thing. We think now that with Social Security Fairness Act, there are potentially as many federal funding protections that we need to be focusing on as we do at the state. Now we would obviously want to make sure that that Social Security Fairness Act stays, that it doesn't get jeopardized or undermined. So we are exploring more federal activity. In fact, some of you probably already know Thomas Martin. He's been stepping into some legislative roles for us in the last couple of years. He just got back from DC a couple weeks ago, trying to explore those options. So we're looking into that. We're looking into federal activity as well, where it's appropriate on your behalf. Yes, sir.
Related to the Optional plans. We've had the 403B available, but now we have the 457 plan available to us. Do you have any opinion on how that's working out?
Again, I am not an investment professional, but generally speaking, I think the issue from our perspective is that if Tier 2 reform occurs, did you make the choice for that plan between a Tier 2 public option and the 403B? Is it an either or?
I'm Tier 1, I'm not even sure.
Okay. My understanding is that folks who are hired today, or January 1st, 2011, are given a choice of taking either the Tier 2 or their own plan. They've called it several different things. I think that's what you're talking about?
No, this was more of a...
All employees nowadays have a chance to sign up for a 457 plan.
In addition to?
Actually, they automatically enroll and you have to hop. And in addition to, you're thinking about the self-directed.
I am.
The 457 plan is just like a 403B, but it's run by the state now. And so, yeah, is it working out, or people go, yeah, if you're not familiar.
I don't, but we can find out.
Isn't it? The 457 is under SERS.
If it is under SERS?
Yeah, well, that's big. It is. It's under the state. Yeah, that's what confuses people. Is that but it's a state plan. It's a 457 plan that is run by the state.
Okay, I'm gonna learn more.
Okay.
I'm got more to learn.
So it's just right now. It's just an additional option that employees have. Or it's not even an option. Now it's automatic enrollment, and you have to opt out. In addition to your...
Is it the deferred compensation? Do they also call it deferred compensation?
It is a deferred compensation plan. It's
Okay.
just like a 403B plan.
Okay.
Or a 401K plan, but it's additional.
I'm going to learn more. I'm going to find out. But we may be talking about the same thing with different names. We'll do the numbers, but...
I thought it fell under SERS. I thought it was something, it falls under SERS, but it's a state plan, but under SERS, I thought.
It might be.
I think it's...
We're going to learn more about that. Where I did think you were going was, I've had folks ask me, well, I'm in the individual plan, so why do I care about Tier 2 reform? And my answer was, if they change Tier 2, then you should have another option to choose between the plan that you've chosen and the new plan that's formed. You should have another bite at the apple, but we'll learn more about those. Yes?
I may have missed it, but did you mention any reason for the hospital systems no longer accepting CVS Aetna?
It's business decision. I don't know why they do that. It's very murky. In fact, I have to give us some credit for being able to identify which hospitals towards the end of the year were even at jeopardy. Sometimes we'll only hear about it if you guys call us and say, hey, I had this problem. Sometimes it'll start out with an individual person having an individual like case-by-case problem, and we won't know that, okay, it's the entire hospital that's got this problem. We've developed some relationships with folks at CMS to try and figure that out, and we've gotten pretty savvy at researching online with some of those things. But I have not found any consistent factor between them. It seems like this hospital's for one reason, this hospital's for another reason. Thank you so much for being here, guys. Appreciate it. Does that answer the question, Linda?
More or less.
Okay.
I was just wondering.
It really is different from hospital to hospital. Where it has the most impact is when it's a Chicago hospital, because that's going to cut across several different legislative districts usually, and that usually gets some people's attention a little bit more.
I was wondering if it was a matter of when the hospitals got their money.
Well, I know it is a money issue. You could simplify it by saying money. Yes, they're certainly debating over how much the hospital gets and how much the healthcare plan gets. And word on the street is that Aetna is challenging to work with. Got any other questions?
One question.
Yes.
So I'm still an employee here, and do you have any suggestions as to what we can do to try to help motivate some of the Tier 2 people to participate in the organization and to try to get more of their questions? Have you had any experience with any other campuses?
In each one of these conversations, there's always one or two individuals who's Tier 2, and so far they've usually been the one at the end of the talk who's like really interested. Wait, how does this affect me, and what can we do? I do think word of mouth is very helpful, but I think, like, There's generational issues, and how we approach them might be different. We may need to be doing more virtual, more digital marketing, things like that. And we have explored that. At my first board meeting, January 24, we talked about the creation of an at-large chapter so that people could just kind of join online, and then we figured out which college they were at. And again, it was kind of Mom where we had this experience, because when I was interviewing, I was like, hey, Mom, you should join this organization. And she looked into it, and she couldn't figure out how. Dad's been gone since '89. She doesn't have any connection to Illinois Central College whatsoever. Why do I need to go to Illinois Central College and have coffee in order to learn about what's happening to my pension or the legislation that's impacting it? And so that immediately triggered a challenge there, that if we go out to the world and say, join today, we've got this friction, as the tech folks call it, right, and the website stuff, because now we've got to say, okay, now wait, which school did you teach at? And then you've got instances where folks taught at multiple schools. And then depending on which schools you taught at, the chapter dues might be different. So you immediately have this really challenging elevator speech to get somebody to join. So the short answer is we're going to try and help streamline that to make it as simple as possible, even so that you can forward something and say, click here and join here today. I would also say encourage them to come join us at the conference, June 13th to 14th this year, the Uptown Normal Marriott. It's downtown. I don't know why they call it Uptown. But we've got our event this year, June 13th and 14th. We're already got the CSRS Executive Director, Suzanne Mayer, to speak as our opening breakfast speaker. And we've invited a constitutional officer. Okay, it's Comptroller Mendoza. We haven't heard back yet, but we're hopeful to have a constitutional officer open us up for our welcome event. And we're also going to have breakout sessions on these topics. You'll have folks zeroing in on the healthcare issues. We actually have a healthcare working group that is an offshoot of our legislative committee. That's got folks who have experienced this, whether it, Carl Clinic, Champaign was kind of epicenter for this about 1.5 years, 2 years ago when this first change happened. So we've still got some holdover from that legislative work that was done in '23, and we're building on that from there. So there's still seats open if anybody has any challenges. In fact, we asked folks for their anecdotal evidence, like, have you had a negative experience? And this is what drove us to the coalition approach. For every time we received a horror story, we received a compliment. It depends where you are, and that's what it taught us. The data very clearly showed us that we can't just point a finger at the monster, that this is much more complex, that some people in our membership like CVS Aetna, like what they've got, and other people don't. What seems to be the common denominator is the where and the who in the terms of the providers. So. Any more tomatoes to throw at me? Huh? Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.